welcome Facebook Live friends, YouTube Live friends, and Zoom friends, and all of our BAPAC members and supporters. We're here today. Thank you first of all, for joining us on our BAPAC General Membership Meeting. And today we're going to be discussing our propositions and measures that are on our November 2022 ballots. And as you're all, I'm certainly aware, we have only 18 days until voting. And voting is, of course, officially November 8th, 2022. And you should have received your ballots in the mail. If not, they're on their way. If they're not on their way, please call the voter registration office. Like, I'm concerned that some of my family members have received their ballots, but I haven't. So I probably will end up calling on Monday to make sure I receive my ballot in the mail. And we're here to share some information with you that will hopefully provide enough information so you can make informed decisions about measures and propositions. This is actually the first convening that BAPAC has ever held in regards to measures and propositions, but we see the importance of all consequences of our votes and as it relates to not only just candidates races, but also measures and propositions. So I would like to go ahead and open us up with a word of prayer, as we do as part of our process here. And then we're going to proceed with our convening and meeting. Again, thank you for being here. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the opportunity to come together and discuss issues and concerns as it relates to uplifting our community here in San Diego, but particularly our African American community. God, we ask that you would allow this meeting to proceed in your name and with your glory, that it will be done professionally, and that it would be expedient, but also informative from a truth perspective about this particular election, that we know that you have control over, but that we make good decisions that will benefit this entire city, state, and nation. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. I'm going to proceed with introducing I'm going to proceed with introducing our speaker this morning. It's none other than Jason Berkovich. Did I get your names pronounced correctly? That's right. Jason is a longtime supporter of BAPAC. And I just want to say, first of all, Jason, thank you for all the work that you've been doing with BAPAC over the last, particularly couple of years, particularly in the congressional information sessions, where you've pretty much helped us reach out to the congressional offices. You've also helped us in preparation for those very important meetings and convenings. And we just appreciate you stepping up to help us out in that regard. And I want to tell you a little bit about Jason. Jason was born in Wisconsin, raised in Puerto Rico, and graduated from the University of California, Riverside with a bachelor's in business economics and a minor in political science. Jason currently serves as the district director for Congressman Scott Peters, where he's been since 2013. Jason previously worked as a financial advisor for decades with various institutions around San Diego. Jason lives in Eastlake with his wife and 2 kids. And we want, again, to just delve right into this very, very important topic. Fortunately, we don't have as many on, my understanding, on the ballot in terms of propositions as we generally do, but the ones that we do have on the ballot are very important. Depending on the way we go, it can affect our daily lives and also have significant community implications. And I want to introduce you to Jason. This is going to be a very interactive session. Jason is going to provide us the pro and the cons information If you have questions, depending on how many are on the call, I think we might be able to take some questions, Jason, and make this a little bit more different since this is our first time out. Jason is even going to describe to us how proposition and measures get onto the ballot. Jason, it's in your hands. Thank you for being here.
Well, thanks a lot, Ellen. Glad to be back. I'm always happy to work with BAPAC, of course, in any way to help just better inform, better educate everyone that's out there. I think that's the key to a lot of the politics these days when it comes to voting and the different proposals that are out there. It's about understanding. That's the key to getting people involved. So today we're going to look at the propositions as well as the ballot measures. So off the bat, a couple of things to note is a proposition carries a number, and those are voted on by everyone in the state of California. So when you're looking at your ballot and you see the numbers, the propositions, those are items that everybody in California votes on, no matter where you are. When you look and you see a ballot measure or something with a letter, that means it's local. So there's one measure for the county of San Diego, everybody in the county is going to vote on. There are 4 measures in the city of San Diego, so everybody that lives in the city of San Diego are going to vote on those. We're going to go over the city of San Diego ones, but there are also additional measures. If you happen to live in a different city or a school district, you can always identify those with a letter. That means there's an element of local nature to that vote. When we're going through these, we're going to highlight 5 different things. So I'm going to talk to you very just bluntly about what a yes vote would mean. We're going to look at what a no vote would mean. I'm going to highlight some of the people that support and oppose each of the proposals. We're going to look at where the money's coming from because we always got to follow the money. And I'm also going to tell you how each of these made it onto the ballot, whether it was our elected officials putting it on the ballot or the signature gathering that you see that happens around the county and around the state. Finally, for those that are on the Zoom, I'm going to post in the chat really quickly. Here's the link to the San Diego County Registrar of Voters. As was mentioned earlier, your ballots should have been received by now. If not, you should receive it shortly since those were just mailed out. If you don't receive it within the next week, definitely contact the Registrar of Voters so they can look at what may have happened to your ballot. And on that note, we're going to go ahead and get started. So can I get a thumbs up if people see my screen? Okay, we're good. So right off the bat, we got Proposition 1. And one other thing that I would say too, that I'll highlight on these is I encourage everybody, even though you have this information, I encourage you to go out and read it as well. Most of these proposals, whether it's the propositions or the ballot measures, you can actually read them faster than it takes to order a cup of coffee at Starbucks in the morning. For example, Proposition 1 is a single page. That's it. This is one page. So I'm happy to provide the information on what it is, but you can always go out and read it because it's a single page proposal. So first of all, how did this make it on the ballot? Well, this made it on the ballot because it was placed on the ballot by Sacramento. So this was placed on the ballot by our elected officials. And what does Proposition 1 do? A vote yes on Proposition 1 would amend the California state constitution to prohibit the state from banning abortions, contraceptives, or interfering with reproductive rights. So essentially, Proposition 1 is a constitutional amendment to enshrine access to reproductive health care in the California state constitution. So if you're voting yes, you're voting to enshrine protections for access to reproductive health care in California. No vote means the constitution doesn't change. However, the laws in California still allow you to get an abortion and to act as reproductive health services if you need them. So that's the law. It doesn't change the law even if you vote no. Who's for this? Well, for it, you've got the California Democratic Party, Governor Gavin Newsom, California Senate President Pro Tem Tony Atkins, as well as the Planned Parenthood of California, ACLU, and California Teachers Association. You'll see on the screen, so total in favor of this is about 9.3 million has been spent. Out of that 9.3 million, about $1 million came from Planned Parenthood, each of them, Planned Parenthood, ACLU, and California Teachers Association, each contributed about $1 million in favor of this. In opposition, the amount of money was negligible, so I didn't list it. You've got the Republican Party, California Conference of Catholic Bishops, and California Assemblymember Randy Volpel, who represents portions of East County. So what are the main arguments around Proposition 1? The proponents of Proposition 1 is fairly straightforward. Those that support Proposition 1 would tell you that this is an additional layer of protection to ensure that reproductive health care is never taken away in the state of California. So this is an additional layer of protection. Why is an additional layer of protection? Well, right now, access to an abortion in the state of California depends on the legislature. It depends on Sacramento. So the law right now in Sacramento says that you can get an abortion, but the laws can change. So the people in favor of Proposition 1 say that this is an additional layer of protection because it amends the Constitution. And in order to take away that amendment, the voters would have to have a say again. So that's in favor of this. Against this, it's largely two arguments. The first argument is this is unnecessary because the law in California already allows for an abortion, so we don't need to make this amendment. And number two, such as groups such as the California Conference of Catholic Bishops, they simply oppose abortions. They believe that life generally starts at conception, and they disagree with the idea of an abortion because they feel like an abortion involves killing. So how you vote on Proposition 1 should largely depend on how you feel about access to abortions or the ability of women to be able to pick and choose their own healthcare and what they do around their healthcare. With that, for those that are on Zoom, I'm going to pause for a minute to see if there are any questions. So feel free to raise your hand and unmute yourself, or you can type it into the chat if there's a question about this proposition. Okay, I don't see any. All right, so let's go back. Now we will move to Proposition. Sorry, here we go. So now it jumps to Proposition 26. So Proposition 1 put on the ballot by the elected officials. The number 1 was specifically chosen by the elected officials to show how important they felt that was. Now we jump. I'm going to discuss Proposition 26 and 27 together before I open it up to questions because the two are very similar. Also, both Proposition 26 and 27 were placed on the ballot by the collection of signatures. So those guys that were standing in front of Vaughn's and Albertsons and Food for Less and asking you to sign, those signatures are what put 26 and 27 on the ballot. So let's look at what 26 and 27 are and why so many people are talking about it. First of all, 26. What does 26 do? 26 essentially does three things, but there's one main thing. The main thing that 26 does is it legalizes sports betting at Native American run casinos and racetracks such as the Del Mar racetrack. So a yes vote on 26 legalizes sports betting at Native American casinos and at racetracks such as that as Del Mar. It also would allow roulette and craps and other dice games to be played at the Native American casinos. And finally, it establishes a 10% tax rate on the sports wagers that are placed at the racetracks. So it establishes a 10% tax rate on the sports wagers at the racetracks, not at the casinos, but the ones at the racetracks. So those are the three primary things that a yes vote does. No? Well, no would not legalize sports betting, roulette, or dice games at the casinos or the racetracks. Who's for it? We've got Native American tribes with casinos have spent $102 million in favor of this so far out of $123 million total. So $123 million is spent in favor of 26, with $102 million of that coming from Native American tribes that run casinos. In addition to the Native American tribes with casinos, California and Young Democrats support this. Deputy Sheriff's Association of San Diego County supports it, as does the San Diego Police Officers Association. In opposition, we've had about $43 million spent. Out of that $43 million, approximately $30 million comes from casinos in California that are not run by Native Americans. They oppose this, as well as the California Republican Party. The California Democratic Party has no position on Proposition 26. So what are the main arguments on 26? Well, the people in favor of 26 say we should legalize sports betting and we should continue to support the Native American tribes that have the casinos. This is a major economic factor for those Native Americans. They also say that they're going to open up betting at the racetracks, and the money earned from betting at the racetracks will go towards helping with gambling addiction. So let's legalize sports betting, in limited locations and put that money to help with gambling addiction. What do the opponents of this say? Well, the opponents largely land along two lines. So they say, one, gambling is bad. So they just oppose gambling in general. And two, they don't like the fact that this is catered to just the Native American casinos. Why not do it for all casinos? How come we're not allowing roulette and craps and sports betting at all casinos? Why are we only allowing it for the Native American casinos? So the casinos in California that are not run by Native Americans oppose this because this is just for the Native American casinos. So that's 26. Now let's look at 27. 27, on the other hand, would legalize sports betting on mobile devices. So you can bet on an app. It doesn't matter where you are in the state of California, you can bet on sports using an app. And then it dedicates a portion of the money earned from those bets towards homelessness and gambling addiction. No on 26 is no on the sports betting using apps. Who's for it? In favor, we've had about 169 million spent. A lot of that coming from businesses like MGM, FanDuel, DraftKings, who run the major sports betting apps. So the companies that run the major sports betting apps support Proposition 27. In addition, the Native American tribes that don't have casinos, they support Prop 27. So does Major League Baseball, and so do the mayors of Fresno, Long Beach, Oakland, and Sacramento. In opposition, we've had about 214 million spent, 167 million of that coming from Native American tribes with casinos. In addition, in the opposition, we've got the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, California Senate President Pro Tem Tony Atkin, and the California Teachers Association. By the end of this election cycle, it's expected that Prop 26 and 27 are each going to have about $400 million spent on them. $400 million each. So why is that? Well, what is this really about? These are investments. What you have with Prop 26 and 27 and why so much money is spent on them is because these are investments primarily by the Native American tribes with casinos are investing in Prop 26. The gambling apps are investing in Prop 27. Well, what is this investment for? The estimate is that if either Prop 26 or 27 passes, $1 billion with a B per month will be wagered on sports. I repeat, if either Prop 26 or Prop 27 passes, it's expected that $1 billion a month will be wagered on sports. So why do I refer to it as an investment? Well, that's what this vote is about. Yes on Proposition 26 means that for the most part, sports betting will be controlled by the Native American casinos, Native American run casinos. That's 26. Prop 27 means that most sports betting is going to be controlled by the apps. So $1 billion a month, they each want to control where that money is going. And that's what this fight is ultimately about. Yes, there's going to be some money towards gambling. Yes, there's going to be some money to help with homelessness, but that's less than 10%. Really, this is a fight over who controls sports gambling in the state of California. And with that, I will pause because I believe there was a question in the chat. Let me see. No. Any questions? All right, no questions on those. Moving on now then. Proposition 27. Proposition 27 is a little bit tricky. And here's the key to 27. So,
is it 27, 28?
Sorry, 28. Proposition 28. Proposition 28 is a little bit tricky. And here's the key. A yes on 28 seems obvious. Yes on 28 requires 1% of all the state money towards K through 12 public schools to go through arts and music. So how much is that? 1%. It's about $1 billion. So yes on Prop 28 will require about $1 billion a year to be spent on arts and music by K through 12 public schools all across the state. That's yes. No doesn't change the current funding formula. So who's for it? In favor, we've got the Democratic Party, California Teachers Association, and Los Angeles Unified. No notable opposition. The Republican Party has no position on this. So what's the complicated part or the tricky part to Prop 28? Prop 28 doesn't give our schools any more money. So what you're doing is you're taking the same pot of gold. So we have the pot of gold is set. We're not adding anything to it. The pie has already been baked. What we're doing is we're changing how that money is distributed. So the people in favor of Proposition 28 would largely argue arts and music is really important. It's actually good for our next generation. It's good for students in elementary school and middle school and high school to take arts classes, to learn about music. That's just good for a well-rounded education. It's good for them to learn these things. So the people in favor of this say that we need to spend more money on these classes because that's good. The people opposed to this would largely argue that it's about local control. By forcing school districts to spend 1% of their money on arts and music, that's 1% less flexibility that they have. And school districts are already pinched. We've got areas across the state where they're struggling to balance their budgets. They're struggling to pay for infrastructure, for air conditioning, to hire new teachers. So to now tell them that they have to spend 1% on arts and music, that's less flexibility for how they currently manage their budgets. So the argument with 28 is largely, do you think that school districts should be required to spend money on arts and music, or no, is largely to give them a flexibility for where they spend that money. But again, no additional money is being provided to schools by Proposition 28. The pie is the pie. The debate is over how that pie gets divided up. All right. And with that, I will pause to see if there are any questions.
I have a question. Okay, so you said that it's 1% of the existing funding. So are there music and arts classes in the schools now?
Some of them have arts and music classes already. So for example, Los Angeles Unified School District supports Prop 28. I don't know the exact reason, but if I had to guess, they are already spending 1% on arts and music. So for Los Angeles Unified, Prop 28 might make no difference. They think that it's good for other school districts to do this. So the school districts that are already spending 1% on arts and music, this won't make any difference to them. This is about the school districts that don't spend that money on arts and music. It would require them to start spending the money on arts and music.
Okay, I'm getting questions on Facebook Live, so I'm going to go ahead and ask.
Yeah, go ahead.
1% for kids programs from general fund vices versus local control that lets districts, lets them spend it on adults. So the question is, how would it be enforced and audited?
The state definitely does a good job of monitoring it. So the state monitors how the schools are spending their budget. So the state would able to see, for example, through the California Department of Education, they would be able to enforce and ensure that the school districts are actually spending 1% on either hiring a new music teacher, hiring a new arts teacher, starting up a new class. The state does have the ability to monitor that spending in the event that Prop 28 passes.
Okay, thank
you. Jason?
Yes, ma'am.
This is Elise.
Go ahead, Elise.
Oh, I have a question. I'm not against arts and music. I'm against the requirement because I think some of our kids in San Diego, in fact, a lot of the Black kids in San Diego aren't reading at grade level, aren't doing math at grade level. I would rather have that money spent on ensuring that all kids have a proper education rather than being required for arts and music. So I would be voting no on that, right?
Correct. And that's a good point,
Okay.
Elise. That's a lot of what this debate is about. It's considering how tight some school budgets are and thinking about whether they should be required to spend the money on arts and music. So if you're concerned about how tight the school budget is right now and whether the school is already spending enough money on, say, a library or giving books to the students or trying to provide students with, for example, tablets, which I know some school districts are doing. So if you're worried that they don't have enough money for the existing programs, then you would most likely vote against Prop 28.
Okay, thank you.
Great question, Elise.
Thanks.
Any other questions on 28? All right, let's move on to the next one. 29. So 29 might look familiar because we're voting on dialysis again. This is like the fourth or fifth time that we vote on dialysis, it seems. It's different than the previous proposals, but I'm going to explain what this is and why we're voting on it again. So this year, Prop 29, again, this is 10 pages, easy reading if you want to go out and read it. A yes vote does two things. Number one, if you vote yes on 29, it would require dialysis clinics to have a medical professional present while dialysis is being administered to patients. So it requires a physician, a nurse practitioner, or a physician assistant to be at the clinic while dialysis is being performed on its patients. It also bans discrimination based on payment source. What's that mean? If you are a patient on Medi-Cal, if you are on Medicare, if you have an HMO, if you have a PPO, that won't matter. No matter who covers your healthcare, the clinic would be required to provide you with treatment. What does a no vote do? Well, it doesn't make any changes to how the clinics operate. In favor, we've got the California Democratic Party and SEIU United Healthcare Workers, which is a union of healthcare workers. The union has spent about $8 million in favor of this. In opposition, we've had $86 million spent, largely from David and Fresenius, which are two of the largest dialysis clinic owners. In opposition, you also have the Republican Party, Chamber of Commerce, and the California Medical Association. So first of all, what's dialysis? Well, dialysis is a life-saving treatment that certain people need that helps them essentially filter out their blood. So it's for people, I believe it's the kidneys. I believe it's for people whose kidneys aren't working properly, and they essentially need to take dialysis to clean out their blood. So we're talking about a life-saving treatment that is needed by people to stay alive. So what do the people in favor of this argue? The people in favor of this argue two things. That's why the proposition does two things. First of all, they argue the medical professional is needed because this is a very dangerous procedure. So like this is a life-saving treatment. And if something goes wrong, you might need to go to a hospital. It might be an emergency situation. So a medical professional needs to be on site to monitor. Also, there are really no requirements to work in a dialysis clinic right now. So a college student can walk in at 20 years old, start making $20 an hour, and perform dialysis on 4 patients at the same time. There's almost no training for the staff at dialysis clinics. And this is a really dangerous, the supporters of this say, medical treatment. So we need professionals on site. The other thing that the people in favor of this argue is we should not be turning patients away just because they don't have a PPO. If you have Medi-Cal, if you have an HMO, you need this to stay alive. The clinics should not be turning you away simply because you don't have the right health insurance. So this is life-saving treatment. Take all the patients and make sure that somebody's there that's a medical professional to monitor in case there's a problem. That's the people in favor. The people against this largely land in 2 buckets. One, and this is the dialysis clinics, they would say, this is a waste of money. We don't need any medical professionals. There's no history of problems with dialysis patients. We don't have a history of medical malpractice lawsuits or people being sent to the hospital. This is just going to be an additional cost on us, the clinic owners, and it's going to force us to shut down some clinics because we can't afford to bear the cost of these medical professionals. So that's number one, is this is entirely unnecessary. This is an extra cost. It's going to force us to close clinics. The other argument against Proposition 29 is this is a push by the unions. The reason that you're voting on this again is because the unions have been trying to organize staff at the dialysis clinics, but they keep failing. And in order to put additional pressure on the dialysis clinics, they put these propositions on the ballot. So the opponents say this is just another way to put pressure on the clinics because they haven't been able to unionize. So how you vote on Proposition 29 largely lands in 2 buckets. One, do you think that this is a dangerous procedure and a medical professional should be present while it's being performed? And do you think that every patient that needs it should be given access to this treatment? If you think yes, you would vote yes on Proposition 29. Or do you think that this is an unnecessary cost, or this is a push just by the unions to exert pressure? If you think that this is an unnecessary and it's just a push by the unions, then you would vote no. And with that, I will pause to see if there's any questions coming in.
This proposition is very near and dear to a lot of hearts of people, particularly on this call. Um, many of my relatives, friends, um, are having challenges, and they rely on dialysis to stay alive. And I'm talking about from young people all the way up to older adults. Um, in my personal survey of them, um, they've never been turned away. Some of them have insurance, some of them don't. Um, they're alive. And so for me, um, I take this one very seriously. It really has an impact on the African American communities. This one is very serious, and I hope everyone else takes it very, very serious. When I do see the American Medical Association against it, um, that speaks volumes. So I will be, and I think all of us should refer to our medical professionals for advice, particularly in the African American community, from Dr. Keela Weber, Assembly Member Dr. Keela Weber, to Dr. Susan Afalo, to Dr. Rodney Hood, and others um, in this particular issue. Thank you. Thank you, Jason.
Of course. Thanks, Ms. Ellen. And yeah, and that's one thing that I would note that's unique about Proposition 29 is, as you can see, the California Medical Association opposes it. We do have medical professionals on both sides, though. I would say it depends on what profession they have, whether you're talking to a doctor or a nurse, their opinions might be very different. But I definitely encourage, as was said, talk to your doctors. Your doctors know best. Talk to your friends that are nurses. Talk to people that you know that might be on dialysis. They can give you a better idea. But ultimately, again, my goal is for you to understand what you're voting on. And your vote is really to determine whether these new metrics are needed for the dialysis clinics, or whether this is really just a push by some to increase to put in place new
Just a minute,
requirements that are
Jason,
unnecessary.
Jason, just a sec. Someone please unmute. Everybody, please mute. Thank you.
Sorry
Okay,
about that.
Jason, proceed. Thank you.
Yep. So I was just saying, this is really a question is whether you think these are new requirements are critical for the clinics themselves. All right, moving on to the next one. Proposition 30. So Proposition 30, I will admit, this is the most complicated item that people are voting on. And you'll notice there's a very weird mix of supporters and opponents. I'm going to explain why. But this is the most complicated proposition, in my opinion, because there are very valid arguments on both sides, and it's really not a Republican-Democrat split. So let's take a look at what Proposition 30 is. Proposition 30, now what it does is pretty clear. What it does is it charges an additional tax of 1.75% on any income over $2 million. So it's an extra tax of 1.75% on incomes over $2 million. For example, if I'm making $3 million, that'd be a dream come true. But if I'm making $3 million a year, the first 2 million I don't have to worry about, but that last million, so from 2 million to 3 million, that last million would be charged a 1.75% tax, which is $17,500. And then that $17,500 would be divided up, as you see on the screen. 45% would go towards rebates to make electric vehicles more affordable. 35% goes to electrical infrastructure, such as building charging stations. And 20% goes to combating wildfires. So we tax the millionaires and put that money towards making it easier to buy an electric vehicle, building more charging stations, and preventing wildfires. That's what this does. No vote means we don't tax the millionaires. You don't have that extra money for the electric vehicles and wildfires. Now, who's for it and who's against it? For it, we've had about $37 million spent, with a majority of that, $35 million, coming from Lyft. We also have the Democratic Party, Congressman Ro Khanna, who represents San Jose, and Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who represents Oakland. They are in favor of it. In opposition, we've had about $12 million spent. You have the Republican Party, Governor Gavin Newsom, California Teachers Association, and the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association. So we've got a weird mix here, where you've got the Democrats on one side, the party, along with a couple of Democratic elected officials. And on the other side, you got the Republican Party with Governor Gavin Newsom, with the California Teachers Association. So why is that? Why do we see this unique split on Proposition 30? Well, let's look at what the supporters and opponents would tell us. Oh, this one is on the ballot by signatures. So this was placed on the ballot by the collection of signatures. And the supporters of this, such as Lyft, would say, look, the millionaires can afford it. So we're taking a little bit of more money from the millionaires, 1.75%, and it's going towards a good cause. We're helping people buy electric vehicles. We're putting in more infrastructure, and we're combating wildfires. So the supporters are very clear cut. Tax the millionaires, put the money towards a good cause. The opponents of this largely land in two buckets. Bucket number one, the Republican Party and the Taxpayers Association, they don't like taxes. They say California taxes enough. We don't need to tax them anymore. They're just going to move away. So one part of the opposition is California taxes enough. They're just going to move away if we keep increasing their taxes. The second part of the opposition is where it gets tricky. And this is why Gavin Newsom and the Teachers Association are against it. Proposition 30 was written by Lyft. I repeat, Proposition 30 was written by Lyft. So one might ask, what is there in this for Lyft? Well, what the governor would argue and what the Teachers Association argue is because that 45% goes to rebates, in order to get a rebate, you have to be able to buy the electric vehicle first. Gavin Newsom and the Teachers Association argue that Lyft is going to buy all the electric vehicles and then they're going to get all the rebates. So this is actually just a taxpayer giveaway to Lyft. For those that don't know, Lyft and Uber actually own a lot of their vehicles and they lease them out to their drivers. So Gavin Newsom and the Teachers Association argue that this is just a taxpayer giveaway to Lyft. That's why Lyft wrote it, and we should be against it. So your vote, and this is where it gets tricky, is one, do you think millionaires can afford to pay the extra tax? If you think yes, then we get to a section part. If you think no, then it's an easy no. So do you think millionaires can afford it? Number two is, do you think the money's actually going towards a good cause? So is the money for the electric vehicles, the infrastructure wildfire actually a good cause? Or is this just a taxpayer giveaway to corporations? How you balance out those questions is largely going to direct you in how you would vote. And now I'll pause for any questions. Not seeing any. Okay. Let's go to 31. 31 is the last statewide ballot measure. Now, 31 is the typical thing that a lot of people hate. So off the bat, yes means no, no means yes. So remember for 31, yes means no, no means yes. So yes and no what? Let's take a look. Yes upholds a ban on flavored tobacco. So yes on Prop 31 means no flavored tobacco in California. If you want no flavored tobacco, you vote yes on 31. No repeals the ban. So no on 31 allows the sale of flavored tobacco. So like I said, yes means no flavored tobacco. No means yes flavored tobacco. Who's in favor? We've got the California Democratic Party, Governor Gavin Newsom, California Teachers Association, and Michael Bloomberg spent about $4 million on this. Kaiser spent about $1.1 million in favor of this. Against it, we've had about $23 million spent. Opposition is largely from the Republican Party and from Philip Morris, RJ Reynolds, Swedish Match, and other leading tobacco companies, cigarette companies. But again, yes, a yes vote would ban flavored tobacco. So if you're voting yes, you're banning flavored tobacco. If you're voting no, you're allowing the sale of flavored tobacco. So if you want flavored tobacco, you vote no. If you don't want flavored tobacco, you vote yes. Yes means no, no means yes. And now I'll pause. Any questions on that one? Okay. Not seeing any. All right, now we're going to move into the local stuff. So first of all, as I mentioned, County of San Diego, we've got one, and I'm just going to put it on the screen because this one's just weird if you ask me. So Measure A, what does Measure A do? Everybody in San Diego County is going to vote on Measure A. Measure A establishes a tax limit rate for various cannabis businesses in unincorporated areas. So if you want to open a cannabis business in an unincorporated area of the County of San Diego, Measure A establishes the limit for the tax rate. It's anywhere from 2 to 6%. Measure No does not establish those limits. However, whether Measure A passes or not, cannabis businesses could still be opened. Here's why it gets quirky. So in favor, we've got the Democratic Party and Republican County Supervisor Joe Anderson. In opposition, you've got the Republican Party. This was placed on the ballot by the County Board of Supervisors. Now, why is this one weird, in my opinion? Well, if it doesn't pass, it really doesn't do anything. So voting no on Measure A does not ban the sale of cannabis. That's the first thing. Second thing is that a lot of the cities already have their own policies. So El Cajon, La Mesa, Escondido, San Diego, Oceanside, Chula Vista, the cities are not impacted by this at all. This is only the unincorporated areas. So we're talking Ramona, we're talking Julian, we're talking Alpine, Borrego. This is only impacting the unincorporated areas. One suggestion that's been made is this was placed on the ballot by the County Board of Supervisors to kind of get a pulse check. So they're getting a pulse check for how San Diego voters feel about cannabis businesses. I don't know for sure, but that's one thing that people are saying. Again, a yes vote simply establishes the limit of how much the county could tax cannabis businesses. The County Board of Supervisors could still come in at a lower number, but it establishes a limit for the most that they can tax. A no vote does not establish those limits. Really, this seems like a pulse check. And I will pause to see if there are any questions. Okay, not seeing any questions there. All right.
Jason,
Yes, go ahead, Elise.
when you say it's a polls tax, can you give us a little more information about what that means?
Yeah, so for example, if I want to open a cannabis retail business, so I want to sell you, I want to sell joints, I want to sell an ounce or an eighth of marijuana, you would pay, there would be a 6% tax. Let's say I want to grow it. So I'm a farmer, I want to grow cannabis plants. Then you would pay, I believe it's 2% on the total amount of cannabis that you were growing. So this sets a maximum tax rate on those businesses that would be dealing in cannabis in the unincorporated area. If you want to be a distributor, so you're the guy that goes and picks up the plants from the farm and you bring up to the business to sell it, you would pay, I think it's 4%. So we're establishing the limit, so the most amount of taxes that could be charged to these different cannabis businesses.
Okay, you use the word polls. It's like the Board of Supervisors, are they trying to do this to see who's going to vote for them or who isn't going to vote for them?
I think that this is being done by them to see, I call it a poll because I think the Board of Supervisors wants to see how San Diego voters feel about cannabis. Since everybody gets to vote on this, even though the cities already have their own rules, and a no vote doesn't ban the sale of cannabis, it largely feels like a poll check, like the supervisors want to see how people feel. Because here's the thing to keep in mind, even if Measure A fails, so let's say Measure A fails, that doesn't block the County Board of Supervisors from allowing cannabis businesses to open. They would just need to pass a different regulation. So that's why I call it a poll, is because no on Measure A doesn't block the businesses. It just goes back to the county board for them to debate additional regulations.
Okay, and they can use it against each other when they're running for office.
They can do that too. All of this can become political.
All
But
right.
I would say on Measure A, 4 of the county supervisors voted in favor of it. You had Joel Anderson, Tara Lawson-Remer, Nora Vargas, and Nathan Flesher all voted in favor. The only one opposed to it was Jim Desmond. So it was a 4-1 vote. Jim Desmond is, of course, running for re-election right now, as is Nathan Fletcher. So this was largely considered a poll vote. I would argue it's a poll vote. Jim Desmond opposed it. Nathan Fletcher supported it.
Okay, thank you.
Jason, I want to also point out this issue has been a recent issue that has arisen. It's in regards to taxes. Of course, first of all, my first question is, what makes this business any different from any other business that's taxed? What makes this different?
Good question. So what makes it different is that the state of California has specific rules that just apply to cannabis businesses. So when we have voted to legalize, first we legalize cannabis for medical, and then we legalize cannabis for general retail. when we voted to legalize cannabis, there was an extensive set of rules that were put in place specifically for cannabis. Why is that? Well, I mean, there are concerns out there about the age of people that are using cannabis, how much they're using it. Are you driving under the influence? How do you test? Do we want cannabis shops set up next to our schools, next to our parks? So
Right.
this would fall in line with how we've treated these businesses previously, which there are definitely special rules for the cannabis businesses based on where we want them to operate and who we want to access it.
So I was referring to liquor license. Is there a
Mhm.
difference here in how we treat a liquor license business and a cannabis license business in terms of taxes?
There are small differences. I would say for the most part, they're treated similarly, but yes,
Okay.
there are small differences, and the amount of taxes that they pay is different. So the cannabis businesses do pay a significantly higher tax bill than liquor stores do.
Okay.
There's a much higher tax rate on cannabis than there is on liquor.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on this one? All right, seeing none. Now we're going to move into the 4 City of San Diego measures. And then I'm happy to circle back on any late arrival questions. So for the City of San Diego, first Measure B. And Measure B and Measure C are actually very similar. And it's important to note, I'll note what that similarity is. But B and C are very similar. So how are B and C similar? First of all, what B and C both do, and then I'll get into the details, is they repeal an existing rule. So B and C don't put in place a new rule. B and C are only about repealing an existing rule. So it's creating space. Now, what is that space with Measure B? With Measure B, a yes vote repeals an existing ban in the City of San Diego on charging a fee to single-family homeowners for trash collection. Okay, so let's translate that. What is yes on B? Yes on B is giving the city permission to charge a fee for trash collection of single-family homeowners. So we're not creating a fee. This doesn't charge anybody. So voting yes on Measure B isn't going to result in you getting a $100 bill next month or a $200 bill next month. Yes on Measure B is simply allowing the city to come up with a new fee structure for trash collection at single-family homes. No, a no on B maintains a ban. So no on B maintains a ban. It says the city cannot charge fees for trash collection at single-family homes. The city's required to collect trash, but it can't charge you for that. So who's in favor of this? You got the Democratic Party, City Council President Shanilo Rivera, the Climate Action Campaign, and the League of Women Voters of San Diego. In opposition, you've got the Republican Party, you've got Carl DeMauro in Reform California, and you've got California Senator Brian Jones. So what are the real arguments that are going into this? Well, the people in favor of Measure B would argue largely one thing, which is the city currently spends about $59 million out of the general fund for trash collection. So the city's currently spending $59 million on trash collection. The people in favor of Measure B would say that's an unfair subsidy. There are a lot of homeowners out there that can afford to pay a fee for their trash collection. If you've got a big old house in La Jolla, or you got a big old beachfront house in Point Loma along Sunset Cliffs, or maybe you've got a big house up in Tierra Santa or Scripps Ranch and other areas, you might be able to afford a fee for trash collection. So give us permission as your city council. This is what the council president would tell you. Give us permission to create a new fee structure so we're no longer spending $59 million out of the general fund for this trash collection. That's what the people in favor of it tell you. The people against it would largely argue, wait a second, homeowners pay property taxes. So if you make homeowners pay property taxes, and then you make homeowners also pay a fee, you're essentially double taxing, and the property taxes are supposed to pay for these services. The property taxes are supposed to pay for trash collection. That's why homeowners pay it. So the way that you vote on Measure B is largely going to be, how do you feel about charging that fee to homeowners? Do you think that some homeowners should be paying an extra fee? Or do you think that the property taxes are sufficient and that should cover trash collection? And now I will pause to see if there are any questions. And I see there was a comment here in the chat that notates that property taxes are already paid by the single family homeowners. So that is part of the argument on this one. For those that feel like property taxes, which are already being paid, should cover trash collection, then you would probably vote no on Measure B. If you think that, yeah, some homeowners can afford to pay an extra fee, then you would vote yes. So how you feel about whether single family homeowners can afford to pay an extra fee and should pay an extra fee, that's largely going to determine how you vote on Measure B. All right, seeing no others. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Miss Ellen.
No, I was just smiling.
All right, Measure C. So why is Measure C similar to Measure B? Well, because again, like I said with Measure B, Measure C is simply repealing the height limit. So we're not deciding what goes in its place. That's not what we're voting on. We're simply deciding whether to repeal the 30-foot height limit in the Midway Pacific Highway Community Plan area. So we're deciding a yes vote repeals that 30-foot height limit. No vote does not repeal the 30-foot height limit. By the way, if this looks familiar, it is. We already voted on this. So we voted on this previously, and previously it passed. So previously the height limit was repealed. However, there was a legal challenge that determined that some steps were not done properly. It was incorrect. So this had to be voted on again. But it did pass previously, although it was challenged legally. So who's for this and who's against this? Strangely enough, or I would say uncommonly now, both Republicans and Democrats in San Diego County support Measure C. So we have both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party support it. You also have Mayor Todd Gloria, and you have the Climate Action Campaign, Nicole Caprins. In opposition, you've got Carl DeMaio, Reform California, and a local community group from Point Loma called Save Our Access. So what are the real arguments going into Measure C? Well, first of all, what's Measure C really addressing? The Midway Pacific Highway Community Planning Area is where the sports arena is located, and also where SPAWAR is located, or NAVWAR, formerly SPAWAR. So we're largely talking about the redevelopment of the sports arena and the area around the sports arena. And we're talking about the redevelopment of NAVWAR and the area around NAVWAR. The people in favor of Measure C, the people in favor, such as the mayor and the two political parties, have argued that without repealing the 30-foot height limit, the math, the economics just don't work. We can't build something new. No developer is going to build something new where the sports arena is. No developer is able to give the Navy what it wants. Where SPAWAR is, the finances simply don't work out if we don't repeal the height limit. So those in favor of Measure C say, you need to repeal the height limit in order to finally allow us to build something where the sports arena is and where NAVWAR is. That's the supporters of this. The opposition of it largely lands under two buckets. Number one, opponents of Measure C would say, wait a minute, why are we repealing the height limit without knowing what's going to take its place? Why aren't we voting on both of those things at the same time? If you repeal the height limit, then who knows what's going to go in? You might have 100-foot tall building and no park space. It's just going to be a big block construction. So the opponents of this, one box of them say, you shouldn't be repealing the limit without knowing what's going to go in its place. That's argument number one. Argument number two is the limit is fine for economic growth. The developers are just being greedy. So the developers could totally redevelop where the sports arena is. They can rebuild where NAVWAR is within the 30-foot height limit. They're just being greedy. They want to build more, and that's why they're trying to repeal the limit. So your thought process on how you vote with Measure C is, do you believe that we should repeal the height limit because that's what it's going to take to properly develop these areas? Or do you believe that, you know what, they could actually build some stuff with the height limit in place, and if we were to repeal it, we should be voting on what replaces it at the same time? That's largely the debate around Measure C. And now I will pause. One other quick note on Measure C, for those that haven't seen it, Mayor Todd Gloria has already announced what project he wants to replace the sports arena. So if you're wondering, well, what's going to go in its place if we repeal this height limit, you can go look it up. The mayor has already announced publicly what he wants built where the sports arena is currently located. That development can only happen if Measure C passes. So if you're wondering, technically we're not voting on what the replacement is going to be, but the mayor has already announced what he wants to replace. Any questions on that one?
Jason, are you referring to the Midway Rising?
Correct. Yep.
All right.
So Midway Rising is the development proposal that the mayor has said that he favored in the event that Measure C passes. Measure C, however, has to pass in order for Midway Rising to be able to move forward in negotiations with the mayor and the city council.
Okay.
Any others on Measure C? Okay. All righty, we got two more. Moving right along. Measure D. Measure D is very straightforward. Yes on Measure D allows the city of San Diego to use project labor agreements. Yes allows the city to use project labor agreements. No does not allow the city to use project labor agreements. Who's for it? Who's against it? For it, we've got the Democratic Party, San Diego City Council member Raul Campillo, San Diego City Firefighters Association, and the California Conference of the NAACP. In opposition, you've got the Republican Party, you've got Council member Chris Cate, Urban League of San Diego, and the National Black Contractors Association. So before we get into the why are these people for and against it, let's explain what is a project labor agreement. Well, a project labor agreement is largely an agreement that the city of San Diego enters into with a local union or a construction company that uses union labor, and it determines what the wages are for all the employees on that project. It determines or usually requires local hiring. So all the people working on that project have to live in San Diego. It determines how, what their work shift might look like. Is it a 10-hour shift? Is it an 8-hour shift? Are they doing 12-hour shifts? Do they get a lunch break? So project labor agreements are largely between the city and a union or a contractor that uses union labor and determines what the working conditions are on that site. That's the first thing. Now, what do the people in favor of Measure D say? Two things. The people in favor of Measure D would argue, one, and you may have seen this campaign over the last couple of days, you've seen BLA, yes on D. Well, why do we want a BLA, yes on D? First of all, because the Padres and Dodgers are playing each other, for those that aren't aware. Potentially decision-determining game tonight. Padres win tonight, they advance. But that's a side note. Why are we saying BLA, vote yes on Measure D? Well, because the state of California requires cities to have project labor agreements in order to access millions of dollars of state money. So right now, there's a prohibition on the city of San Diego using project labor agreements. That means that the city of San Diego is not eligible for millions of dollars in state money. So yes on Measure D would allow the city of San Diego to compete with Los Angeles and San Jose and Oakland to access millions of dollars of state money. That's one reason for yes. The other reason for yes is people say it's good to use labor union. It's good that we're hiring people that live here locally. Why would we want a bunch of people coming in from Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico to build a project in San Diego, and then they're just going to go back home and spend all that money back home? We should hire locally because they spend locally. That's the people in favor of Measure D. The opposition of Measure D is largely along the lines of one argument, which is project labor agreements are expensive. When you hire labor workers, when you guarantee them a living wage, when you make sure that it's people working here locally and they do an 8-hour day or a 10-hour day, when you negotiate out all that, there's a significant added cost to it. So if we allow the city to use project labor agreements, we're just making the city projects more expensive. So when you're thinking about how to vote, really the decision is, one, do you think that project labor agreements are good? Or two, do you think project labor agreements are bad? If you think they're good, you vote yes. If you think they're bad, you vote no. But that's largely how you'll align on this one. And I see one hand up, so I will pause and call on Brother Hamid. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jason. And thanks for allowing me to come in and have a share in this dialogue. Primarily, Jason, you pointed out, and I read the ballot measure, San Diego would be threatened to lose infrastructure rebuilding money, which, of late, the municipal court judge has proven or has stated that that is a false and misleading statement, that San Diego is not threatened by loss of infrastructure building. And when you break down the word PLA, project labor agreements, it is an exclusive agreement, as you stated, between the city of San Diego and the trade unions, and which will exclude open shop non-union apprenticeship programs like the Black Contractors Association that is legally approved to train and hire workers on the job. No PLA has ever allowed any non-union apprentices. The other thing you stated about negotiating for better wages. PLAs are basically using prevailing wages, which are already set in stone by the state of California. State of California has a wage rate that is a level playing field for non-union contractors and union contractors. So what this basically is, and the reason why the proponents of the arguments have brought this forth, and I understand that a President Emeritus that was probably president 10, 20 years ago, Mr. Jordan, has signed off on this agreement, but the national president and the official rule position of the national NAACP, then president of the President Kwasi Mfume, has basically condemned project labor agreement, mandatory labor agreements. It is proven that in the economic interests of Black people, labor apprenticeship programs have not benefited, and they hurt and harm. They are exclusionary. Not that we're against the unions, we're just basically against the exclusionary practice. So I bring this question to you because we could talk offline, and I would like to invite you to do that, to have a discussion about these pros and cons. And so what this is really about is we really recognize that the Democratic Party is fueled by the working labor poor, the Labor Party. And so this is more of a payback to the trade unions. I've talked to many Black electeds. They have signed up, like when you take on money from the trade unions, it tells you you have to support labor agreements and the LGBTQ measures. So it's not about that, about whether we're going to get state money or not. The judge has ruled that it may, that this is false and misleading. And so that's really the crux of it all. And so that's where I'm sharing this information. And why would anybody that's for supporting reparations for Blacks vote for something that's going to support Black self-interest, which is the National Black Contractors Association, our apprenticeship program, and many of our our contractors, which 80% of the construction industry is non-union, 20% are. So where are they going to get all the work, the workers, when they have the airport authority, they have the water authority, they have city schools, they have just about every major municipality is a project labor agreement. So where are they going to find 100% to do it? It's a hostile takeover. It's force mandated. If you want to work, you got to sign a labor agreement and leave your workers at home and use union workers. That's our issue, and that's our argument. How do you see? And I know we're not here debating, but what do you see? What do you see?
No, so what I would say, and again, my goal is really just to inform those that are listening and to have a better understanding. So I would say everything that Brother Hamid is presenting is a valid argument in opposition of Measure D, except for one. I will make a note. So, but overall, Brother Hamid's argument is entirely, I consider it imbalanced. Those are all valid points for opposing Measure D. The only one that I'll push back on slightly is the access to state funds. I will say that is still, that's not determined. So I'm not saying that we're automatically losing access to state funds. I'm not saying that we're automatically going to lose access to state funds if Measure D fails. What I would say, though, is there is a valid argument that we are potentially going to lose access to state funds because that's an unsettled matter. As was brought up, it is in front of the courts. Courts can, there's appeals processes, there's other steps that can be taken. So it is unsettled as to whether we are potentially going to lose access to state funds if the city of San Diego can't use project labor agreements. Aside from that aspect of it, I say everything else that was brought up is accurate and is a valid ring of opposition.
That has been an argument. But one other thing, that the work that is being done in the city of San Diego currently and historically has been paid by the local taxpayers. So we're not using project labor agreements. And the proponents say that we're going to fight discrimination. Well, the city of San Diego has allowed discrimination to happen against African Americans, women, and people of color for all too long. So this, this deserves a real in-depth conversation, and I would love to do it. We're going to be meeting with Carol Kim in the building trades to have a discussion about how to make a PLA work if it does work. So this removing of the ban will allow the city to negotiate PLAs, which basically are going to be like they have been written already. And so that's why the voters voted in 2012 not to allow government mandated project labor agreements. And here we are again, as you stated, coming back to allow project labor agreements to do something better or different. Anyway, that's my bit. I appreciate
Correct. No,
that.
and like I said, all those points by Brother Hamid are valid points. So I don't see anything that was brought up that would not meet what would not fall within the valid, legitimate political debate that's happening around Measure D. A lot of times, and compliments to Brother Hamid, one of the things that we see is people like to bring up a lot of stuff that doesn't actually apply to what your vote is. They put a whole bunch of fluff in there that some would argue is a bit of a stretch on the truth. I mean, all the points brought up by Brother Hamid are again very valid points, and I think that's one of the reasons, as I noted in the slideshow, why even within the Black community you can see the split here. So whereas the California Conference of the NAACP is supporting Measure D, you have the Urban League of San Diego County and the National Black Contractors Association opposing Measure D. So again, these are real questions. These are valid political debates that are happening out there. And I ultimately leave it up to you as the voters to decide whose story resonates more. Who do you believe? But there are valid arguments to be made on both sides. So I'm going to go, we have one more city of San Diego, and then I'll go ahead and open it up, and we can always go back to any other ones. But let's cover the last one, because this might be one of the easiest votes that you take, in my opinion. That'll be the one opinion I give you, is I think this is one of the easiest votes that you take. So we've got Measure H. What does Measure H do? Measure H allows the city manager for City of San Diego to approve childcare activities in city-owned buildings and on parkland. So you're allowing childcare activities on parkland. No, does not allow childcare activities on parkland. Currently, the only activities allowed in parkland is recreational activities or park activities, as they call it. Who's in favor? Well, we've got both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party agree on this one. We also have the Regional Chamber of Commerce and the YMCA agree on this one. There's no notable opposition to Measure H. So Measure H is actually pretty straightforward. What is a yes vote? A yes vote would essentially allow the YMCA to negotiate with the city of San Diego to open up a after-school program at Mission Beach, or open up an after-school program over by Belmont Park in the grassland that's over there. This yes on H allows for other nonprofits, childcare providers to enter into a contract with the city to pay the city to use the parkland for childcare activities. Again, we know that childcare facilities are severely lacking around the city. So this has been brought forward to try to open up where childcare facilities can work. The other thing that I would note is it's not that we're giving away control of the parks. These are contracts that would be signed by the childcare providers with the city of San Diego. So this is one of the reasons why I think the YMCA is in support, because it allows the YMCA to negotiate a contract with the city of San Diego to maybe, set up some games in a park around. It doesn't have to just be at the YMCA where they're doing those after school programs. They can go to the park and start to provide programs at the park itself. That's a yes vote. No would just maintain the restrictions on how parks are used. Any questions on H?
I have a question. You're saying nonprofits. What about for-profits? A lot of Black and brown childcare providers are for-profit.
Anybody. So YMCA, I was just highlighting YMCA because they are one of the people know the YMCA, they support this, but anybody can enter into a contract with the city of San Diego. So a for-profit childcare provider could enter into a contract. You would pay the city of San Diego to be able to use a certain, let's say, a room inside of a rec center. So you can go to, we want to rent a room inside the rec center, and we're going to use that room to provide childcare after school or during the day. So for-profit, nonprofit, doesn't matter. They would be able to enter into a contract with the city to use those facilities.
Okay.
Any others
Jason,
Yes,
yeah,
Elise.
does that mean that like Pop Warner and Little League teams can use the parks for their activities?
Correct. In general, they're allowed though, because those I believe are largely considered recreational. So this is
Okay.
it's more correct. It's not. I would view it more as non-sports, because
Okay.
Pop Warner, that's recreational. Little League, that's recreational. This is really more for the non-sports. So that's why I bring up after school programs. So after school, you have an elementary kid. Instead of going home, they might be able to go to the park. So, and the YMCA has a program at the park that they're doing. Instead of having to go to, say, the Martin Luther King YMCA, they could go to the park to do their class or their games after school. That's what this is. Or a for-profit provider could, turn one of the rooms in the rec center into a play area. So kids can go play games there after school, waiting on their working parents to get home. That's largely what we're talking about. It's more non-sports activities.
Thank
And
you.
it would be the infant to from infant. Okay. And that's the issue right now is there's a childcare desert.
Yep.
Particularly in under-resourced communities where parents are unable to work and all the other things we do. So this is okay. This one is a good one.
Correct. And many would argue it's a good one, including Democrats and Republicans that agree on this. And also, kind of to that point, Miss Ellen, is there's a lack of buildings. So a lot of things with childcare facilities, even for a for-profit childcare facility, that's what the people in favor of Measure H would tell you. Like, look, there aren't buildings available for them to work in. So why not take advantage of all this space already at the parks? Why not take advantage of these rec centers that the city has already built that oftentimes are there unused? You have all these building space that's unused and put it towards a good cause. So that's what the supporters of Measure H would say.
Excellent. Thanks, Jason.
All right. So just one more quick thing, and then I will open it up across the board. Just in case you don't live in the city of San Diego, you might see some other stuff on your ballot. Carlsbad has a measure on there. Chula Vista has a measure. El Cajon, Encinitas, Escondido has a few. Imperial, National City, Solana Beach. There's also different school district measures that are going to be on there for bonds and other matters. Lemon Grove, San Diego Unified Ambient Council. So again, as I mentioned earlier, I would encourage you, look through the ballot, see if you're not in the city of San Diego, look up some of these other measures. But most of these are easy reading. Again, while you're sitting in your car, waiting in line at Starbucks in the morning to get your coffee, you can read most of these measures. You can read most of these propositions. So while I hope that the information that I provided gives you a better idea as to what we're looking at and what the argument in favor is, what the argument against it is, I always encourage you to definitely go out and do your own research, do your own reading. Thank you, Brother Hamid, for that input. There's a lot of other details, but hopefully this gives you a better idea of the top level and what to look out for, what to think about when you're choosing how to vote. So with that, I turn it over to Miss Ellen and any other questions that might be out there. Great.
Thank you, Jason, for this wonderful presentation. It was non-biased, just straightforward. And again, we now have the positions on both sides. I think it's Stephen Rosen on the call. Measure U. Dr. Rosen, you want to weigh in on Measure U? I know we have other ballots, but since we all live for the most part, the city of San Diego Unified School District is the 7th largest school district. I think we need to at least, if you can make some comments that maybe Jason or others might have something to say.
Yeah, thanks, Ellen, and thanks, Ellen and Jason, for doing this. I really appreciate it. And one, for transparency, I'm not a doctor.
Oh,
just a parent and an education philanthropist, if you will. Very, very active in education and have known Ellen for a very long time. Yeah. One of the bond measures that's near and dear to me is the bond issue that San Diego Unified basically unilaterally put on the ballot for the November elections at the very last minute. And I think it's really important for people to understand some of the issues behind it and some of the reasons or some of the some of the important issues behind it that are not typically thought about. And one, and to me, one of the most important is that bond measures like this are paid for by everybody. So if you're a property owner, you pay for it, whether you have a kid in school or not. So what we find is that many property owners who don't have kids in school don't believe that the bond measure is impactful to them. The other thing that happens is when you look at it and you look at the demographics, what they are asking to do is increase their $2.6 billion that they already have currently from past bonds available to them. And they're asking for another $3.2 billion, which actually has a payback by taxpayers in the community of $7.3 billion over decades. What does that mean? That means people who are below the poverty level paying rent, people who are homeowners, who are seniors, fixed income, low income, underserved, underprivileged, are all basically going to subsidize this bond. And the bond is touted as a security measure when in fact more money is being spent by the district for real estate development for their employees than on security. And on top of that, the previous bonds have many of the same security projects built in that were not facilitated by the district. So to me, the district is shamefully using school shootings as a way to appeal to people to vote for the bond when they haven't in fact done anything with the money that they had previously approved to use it. And the other issue is those people who can least afford it are now going to have to pay even more money because they're already going to be paying, they already are paying for the previous 3 bonds. And I'm happy to answer any questions that someone might have about a bond, about Measure U as well.
Any questions? You know, and we don't have many questions, and I think it's one of our Zoom participants asked me because we don't study thoroughly enough, review these measures and propositions. So piquing our interest is where we are today. And I think in the future, it's going to also generate more questions. Overall, one of the questions that I've received from folks, and it kind of speaks to Stephen's point, do all of these measures and propositions increase our taxes? That's the question that I've across the board. Which measures, or do they all increase taxes? Because I'm on our Facebook Live, we're getting participants saying some of us are struggling already, with inflation and challenges we're having now. And is this another tax on top of the taxes we already pay in regards to just overall? And that may be an unfair question, but that's the question that I get most of the time. And that's the question I always ask myself in regards to these propositions and measures.
And I'll just, good. That's a great question. It's always good to think about. For those that are worried about taxes, this year is actually very straightforward. The only areas that impact your taxes this year are Proposition 30, which impacts people that make over $2 million a year. So Proposition 30 is a clear tax on those that are making over $30 million a year. Measure A deals with taxes, but for cannabis businesses. So if you run a cannabis business, then Measure A is going to impact your taxes. And then some argue that Measure B, where we're dealing with trash collection, it's not considered a tax, but it's still considered a fee. So Measure B. So really, when it comes to taxes or fees, you're looking at Measure B, Measure A, and for those that are making over $2 million, Proposition 30. Those are the main ones. Now, of course, the bonds have a cost for any bond that passes, costs the people that live in that area. So if San Diego Unified passes a bond, or Lemon Grove passes a bond, or Sweetwater passes a bond, bonds are paid for by all the people that live in those areas. So when you're voting On a bond, you should always consider where the money is going and is it worth the additional cost, the additional taxes that you're going to have to pay.
Yeah, and I would add, sorry for jumping in, but because it says property tax, it's still applicable to renters, because people who are renting from people who own the property, when their costs go up, so will rent. And so again, a lot of people don't see or understand. And if you're sort of barely getting by and renting, and property taxes increase and your landlord increases your rent, you in essence are paying for that. So that's my comment.
And that's one argument that we often see against some of these matters, is that even landlords will push the costs onto renters. So potentially, if you're charging an extra fee to landlords, then that could result in higher rents. It's a valid argument that's out there. Brother Hamid, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I appreciate, again, the invitation, Madam Chair, President of BAPAC. If there's not any questions or anything like that, you guys can contact me via telephone, the Black Contractors Association, but I appreciate the opportunity. So if there's no other questions or concerns, I have to jump into another meeting. I got a big fight to get out here.
Thanks, Brother Hamid.
All right, thank you.
I have one more comment. So back to the one where you're going to tax the wealthy, and that's going to pay for these electric cars. These electric cars are very, very, very expensive. What kind of reach are we talking about? I just don't see it as real. I don't see it as realistic. The taxing the rich and then purchasing an electric car. I just don't see the relevance there, because the price point of electric vehicles is absolutely ridiculous.
No, and again, this is where you have some weird mixes of people that are in favor and are against it. That's one of the arguments by Governor Gavin Newsom and the California Teachers Association. What they argue is that the cost of an electric vehicle is so high that the only people that are able to buy them and then wait on getting their rebate back are the companies like Lyft and Uber, or people that have the money already. So that's one of the arguments against Proposition 30, is even if the millionaires could afford to pay the extra tax, is the money actually going back to the people that need it most?
Right.
And the opponents argue that it's not, that the people that need the most help to afford buying an electric vehicle aren't getting that, because essentially the way that a rebate works is you have to come up with the $30,000, $40,000 first to buy the car, and then they pay you back on the back end. So for somebody that can't come up with the $40,000, it doesn't matter what the refund is, because you can't come up with the $40,000 in the first place to buy the electric vehicle. So that's definitely part of the argument against Proposition 30.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have another question about Mr. Rosen, talking about the 2.6 billion and the 3.2 billion. I'd like to know something about the people who are supporting that, measure.
The people that are supporting Measure U,
Yes.
they're primarily the teachers union. They are the Democrats, and I think that's all. Jason, you probably have it in front of you. I don't have it in front of me in terms of the ballot, the supporters and non-supporters.
The measures are the bond measures are generally posted on the ballot by the school board members. And oftentimes it will be supported by school teachers and staff. So that is generally how school bonds show up. So they show up on your ballot because the school board puts it on your ballot. The support will often come from teachers and other staff within the school district.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Any more questions? Jason, you did a wonderful job, and we really appreciate your time. I know you had to do a lot of research, and but you did a very, very thorough job. I want to just make some comments, general comments. Again, we only have 18 days to vote. So it's important that we all vote and vote by mail. I mean, if you haven't received your ballot, call Monday and make sure you have your ballot in place. And BAPAC is going to be looking at what next steps that we need to take based on the outcome of the election, the midterm election. We're going to stay focused on the data. We're going to stay focused on the issues as it relates to the African American community, but we're going to be taking a look at what happens next. So if you write this date down, save the date, January 28th, we're going to be having a BAPAC San Diego Summit. We held at the Educational Cultural Complex. It will go from the morning, a luncheon, and then a gala that evening. So that's going to be January 28th. We also need to lift up our concerns and our voices relating to the LA City Council racist comments. It has impacted our community in terms of triggers that have occurred that I've received from people, BAPAC members, friends, relatives, colleagues. So we need to continue to lift the LA City Council, lift them up in prayer, and also voice our opinions as well. Wanted to encourage everyone on this call and also listening by Facebook Live and YouTube to join BAPAC. You can go to the BAPACSD.org. Our membership fees are a minimum of $25. If you're a business owner or you represent a nonprofit, it's a little higher than that. But this helps us with funding forums and our general membership kinds of issues. We are also going to be convening a Black Homeless Summit in the next couple of months, given the fact that Blacks make up 4 to 5% of San Diego County, but we make up 35 to 45% homeless. There has to be an issue that we address around that particular piece. Also want to remind you about the Human Relations Commission. We meet on Tuesday at noon. You can go to the San Diego County Human Relations website, find out more about our convenings there. One important race I want to bring to your attention is the deputy sheriff's race that's occurring. They're having a forum. The Earl B. Gilliam Bar Association will be having a forum tomorrow at, I believe it's 6 o'clock. I'm sorry, Tuesday at 6 o'clock. We have sent out the flyer. I'll make sure I send it out to all of you. That's a very important race that we need to weigh in on as well. And let's just, hey, make sure we vote. That's the biggest piece that's on the table. That's what keeps me up at night, worrying about ensuring that particularly African-American folks, that we vote, that our voices are lifted up only through our vote. After it's over and things don't go our way, I don't see how we can complain if we haven't checked the boxes on that ballot. So I want to say again, it's 1:35. We're leaving early.
Ellen,
Any other
Ellen,
or that people want to say? Thank you.
Ellen, can you hear me?
I can.
Ellen, oh, okay. I just wanted to just give one more clarification from Jason, because I just don't quite understand the historical aspect of the dialysis. If he could just share with that again, I just can't wrap my head around why this is brought forth again.
Sure. Good question, Brenda. So the dialysis propositions have been placed on the ballot by signature gatherers. So this has been signature gathering campaigns. Essentially, the debate is the supporters would argue that they're trying to make dialysis safer. They're trying to make it better for patients. The opponents would tell you that we keep voting on this because the unions are trying to unionize and they keep failing. So the two arguments are improve healthcare, improve the quality of treatment that people get when they go for dialysis, or do you think that this is just a union push to put pressure on the clinic owners? That's largely the debate. But that's why it keeps coming up, is either one or the other is collecting signatures to put this stuff on the ballot.
So it's about union. This is all behind unionizing dialysis.
That's one argument on these ballot propositions. Yes, is that the unions are trying to unionize and they keep failing. So in order to put pressure on the clinics, they put the propositions on the ballot. So that is one argument against it.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Dr. Brenda Miller is a healthcare professional. So that's why she asked that question, which is it's still very confusing as a voter.
Correct.
Yeah,
I think what's toughest is there's a debate about whether the additional medical is needed. So we previously voted, for example, one of the previous votes that failed was the size of the bed that you would lay on while you're getting dialysis. We also voted on the size of the doors and like the hallways for dialysis clinics. So that a lot of the question around these is, how do you think about the safeness of dialysis? Do we need more protections in place to ensure that it's safe, that we have medical professionals there, or is it already safe? That's a lot of what the debate is about.
Well, there's something about the union that's kind of like a thorn in my side, because unions are very strong, and there's some voice that's not being heard. There's somewhere that union is stirring around in the pot somewhere.
And the union spending $8 million in favor of this. So that definitely gives some direction. They spent $8 million in favor of it.
Okay. So they're in favor. Thanks, Jason.
Correct. The union is the largest financial supporter of this proposition. And we're talking about, this is number 29. So the union is the largest financial backer of 29.
Okay, so they want dialysis unionized.
Correct. There is an effort to unionize workers at dialysis clinics.
So what does that have to do with patient safety? I guess, again, to me, like, I can't connect the dots here.
So the unions and the people in favor of Proposition 29 would argue that they're better trained. So the United Healthcare workers, so their workers have very important training that they go through, time, doctors. So they would argue that it's all about the proper training. Currently, there are minimal requirements for what it takes to look at a dialysis clinic. So, like I said, a 20-year-old could walk in off the street, start making $15 an hour, and be taking care of 4 patients at the same time. Now, do you think that additional training is necessary? That's a lot of what this comes down to. Do you think that it's necessary to have a doctor on site? So that's really what this debate is about. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but that's a lot of what this debate is about. Is, do you think that the additional training is needed that the union would provide? Do you think that there needs to be a doctor on site in order for patients to be administered dialysis?
But the thing of it is, Jason, I feel like the union is playing on the dialysis patient's emotional side. Why? Because, when I see dialysis, I don't see untrained people. I see registered nurses at the bedside. And what I saw the emphasis was having the medical doctors at the bedside, whereas medical doctors don't feel like they need to be on site. That means dialysis could be administered 24 hours. That means and that would entail a medical doctor being on site 24 hours. Well, medical doctors don't want to be on site 24 hours, which they don't have to be because they administer dialysis in the hospital. So what's the logistics behind, well, if you're doing dialysis in the hospital, are you considering the emergency room doctors or the hospitalists being the doctors that are overseeing the dialysis in the hospital? So it seems like it's going to get murky when you start saying doctors have to be on site. So there's a lot of convoluting issues that's involved in this. And with the union pushing.
And Brenda, I would say those are all valid concerns. So those are all valid concerns to consider in how you're voting on Proposition 29.
Yeah, but when I see the union, I always know the union.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Miller, for pointing those valid concerns out. And again, it's helping. The more information we have, the better informed voting decisions that we can make. Okay, with that said, anything else for the good of the order? Thank you all for being here. Thanks for being on Facebook Live and YouTube. Refer back to Facebook Live and YouTube if you need to before you fill out your ballot. This has been a very thorough discussion. And I want to say it's 1:45, and I want you all to have a great rest of your weekend. Get some rest. And remember, don't forget to vote. Take a friend, take your family members, check on them all over the country. Call them up. Have you voted? Because this is a very important election. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Great meeting, great meeting, great meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elise.